Almost there.
Do I have to hit get it?
Yeah.
I got it.
Oh, you did it.
I have it here. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Senate Democratic Caucus. It's great to have all of us here. We have a lot of bills. We're in the middle of crossover, and all the policy bills that had been voted out of committee on Friday, we are now, they go to the money committees if appropriate and or to the floor. And so it's a very busy week, and committees are starting at 1 o'clock. So we want to make sure we get some of our discussion done on some of our bigger, some of our top priority bills, housing, childcare, and we have some labor bills to discuss as well, and a sheriff bill. But we're going to begin with the childcare bill, which has many moving parts and lots of components to it, and is a fairly sizable bill. So Senator Lyons and Senator Hardy are going to take the conversation on the child care bill, and we will start with Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Senator Clarkson. I'm going to just say a couple of words and then turn it over to the bill reporter, Senator Hardy. As you know, COVID has really exacerbated the problems that we see with child care, and it's critically important right now for our economic development, our businesses, that their workers have access to child care. The goal of the bill is to improve that access, to expand child care, hopefully with some of the policies that we have in place in the bill as it will be presented to finance, appropriations, and ultimately to the full Senate. There are a lot of components of the bill. There was discussion and there has been a dialogue regarding pre-K. The Education Committee has done a great deal of work in providing us with an amendment regarding pre-K, but overall the bill really focuses on the expansion and improvement of access to child care, the workforce, the child care workforce, child care centers, and folks who are working and supporting the businesses that we have, and businesses that helping to support these folks in child care. So Senator Hardy is a reporter, and I'm going to turn it over to her, and between the two of us, perhaps we'll be able to answer questions regarding financing and some of the policies that are in the bill.
Thank you. And I just want to, before Senator Hardy starts, it's great to have some of you back, because we've been missing some of you who've been struck as I was with COVID. So it's great to have so many of you back. It's really terrific. And Senator Maza was very kind to bring the snacks, and they are on the back table. So please avail yourself. Senator Hardy.
Great. Thank you, Senator Clarkson and Senator Lyons. So as you all know, this is a very big bill with lots of parts to it, and is one of our Democratic Caucus priorities for the session. So I will take you through the high level. There are a lot of details, so I'm happy to answer questions on details. But Senator Lyons mentioned pre-kindergarten. As you know, there was a provision in the original bill that would have provided full-time pre-kindergarten for 4-year-olds in all public schools. That is, as we do with a lot of things, moved to a study. So there's a study in the bill about pre-kindergarten, and hopefully we can come back to that topic next year. There is a reorganization of the two relevant departments / agencies, the Agency of Education and the Department of Children and Families. Reorganization is maybe a little bit strong for what happens in Agency of Education, because it's just creating a deputy secretary of early childhood education and special education. So it's sort of lifting a position that's now a division director to being a deputy secretary, to raise the profile of early childhood education and frankly special education within the Agency of Education. And then in DCF, the Department of Children's and Family, this is more of a reorganization. This is a department in the Agency of Human Services, and DCF has a lot on its plate. So many of the major programs that come out of the Agency of Human Services are on the plate of DCF. And so the bill divides this department, and people who've been around for a while, I've been told that this is similar to the way it used to be, looking at Senator Kitchell, but I'm pretty sure it's similar to the way it used to be. So now the Department of Children's and Families would have the Child Development Division, CDD, which oversees childcare. And the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, and the Division of Family Services, which has foster care and children in need of services. So those would stay in the Department of Children's and Families. And then the bill creates a Department of Economic Empowerment that has most of the programs that are more or less that give out money directly to families and individuals, including the Economic Services Division, the Disability Determination Services, the Office of Economic Opportunity, and the Office of Child Support. So that creates a new department within the Agency of Human Services and a new commissioner to oversee that. But a lot of it is just moving people and programs over. So that's the sort of reorganization, but the big part of the bill is about child care and child care subsidies. The bill increases the eligibility for the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, otherwise known as CCFAP. Currently, there are no co-pays for people up to the income of 150% of federal poverty level. The bill raises that to 185% of poverty level, which is consistent with the level for free and reduced lunch in our schools. It expands family eligibility for participation in CCFAP from 350% of federal poverty level. That is the current cap. It raises that up to 600%. And I unfortunately didn't bring my chart with me on poverty levels. I don't know if Senator Lyons has it, but we can get you. I will have it for the floor. I will have it for the
180.
floor.
180. 600 is 185.
But 600 is about 100. Yeah, 185,000 for a family of four.
180 for a family of four.
180 for a family of four, and I'll have all that information for the floor report. But it significantly increases the eligibility. And one of the reasons that the prime reason we go up to 600% in the bill is that it eliminates a cliff where you're eligible, then you earn $1 more and you're not eligible. So basically going up to 600% creates a smooth track up and doesn't drop off, because the vast majority of people who have children in our state do not make more than $185,000 a year. So this is really smoothing it so that families don't have to suddenly pay a lot for childcare because they got a promotion or an increase in their wage. So it sounds like a lot, but that was really the policy reason why. It also requires that applications be in plain language and available on electronic and paper formats. Right now, the application is really complicated. It's only on paper. And so we're asking them to develop a more plain language and do it so that people can access it electronically. There's a provider rate adjustment. There's a one-time adjustment that bumps up the rate that we pay child care providers. And the child care providers have to be licensed. They're regulated by the state. They can be home or community-based providers as long as they do what they need to do to be eligible for the state. And this one-time bump is basically a 38.5% increase in what is considered the highest rate that we pay, the sort of highest, most highest quality programs, which are 5-star programs. And this is the same for providers of in all childcare settings. So there's right now a difference between childcare providers and what they get for rates, and this makes it the same for all of them. The payment establishes an ongoing payment with an increase every year based on the national average wage growth for New England. So the New England average increase in compensation. That would be the increase that is provided to providers every year going forward after this big rate increase of 38%. And the payments to child care providers will be based on enrollment, not attendance, which is a really big deal. It's something that we changed during COVID so that child care providers got paid for the child, even if a child was out because of illness. So it maintains that. It's a huge deal for child care providers because they still have to pay everybody and pay for the facility, et cetera, even if the child is out sick. And then it creates an enhanced reimbursement rate for infants and toddlers to be set by the commission. Senator Lyons likes to call this the baby bump, so that it's more expensive to provide care for infants and toddlers because the ratios have to be lower. So you have to have more staff for babies because those of us who cared for babies knows they're very high maintenance.
As opposed to
I see
all of
Senator
us.
Watson nodding her head. And then there's an annual flat incentive rate for all providers who are 5 stars. We have a star system, a 1 through 5 star system in the state. Some of you have probably heard this from constituents. It has helped our state increase the quality of programs, but because the rate that we pay providers is based on that star program, it becomes problematic. If you're a low star program, in order to increase your quality, you might not have the money to do it, and therefore it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you don't get paid, then you can't increase your quality, and you don't get a better star to get paid higher. So this just provides a one-time, an annual sort of incentive for high 5-star programs or for programs that increase their stars. And it's not baked into the rate anymore. So the rate would be the same for all programs. So we're not creating that sort of problem, but we're still rewarding programs for being high quality programs. And that was a compromise worked out with the administration and others. Then let me see, it prohibits child care providers from charging an application fee or a wait list fee for people who are qualifying for CCFAP. This is big. We've heard from people that they're paying hundreds of dollars to get on wait lists around the state because it's hard to get child care, and it sort of makes it difficult for it to be affordable. So then we also create more studies, and this one is about creating a tiered professional pay scale for professionals providing childcare services as part of CCFAP. This was in the original bill. It's actually something that we really need to have some professionals look at to create a tiered professional salary scale. And what should childcare providers be paid compared to public school teachers and others, making sure that they are paid commensurate with their profession and the work that they do. And then there would be reports back on that scale, whether it's possible, what it should be, how it should be implemented. There are a series of reports in the bill, which I'll go through in more detail on the floor, or if you want me to. And then, there's a creation of a non-citizen child care financial assistance program. This is similar to what we've done in the past with Dr. Dinosaur. These are for people who may not have the eligible documentation to be eligible for a federally funded program. So they are people who are in our community, contributing to our communities and our workforce, and who have children and need childcare. In my district, some of these people are migrant farm workers, and we need these people to have childcare. We need their children to be in high quality programs. So this creates a program just for this subset of people who otherwise would qualify because of federal requirements. And then there's a report back about special accommodations grants, which are grants for special education services in childcare programs. Then finally, there's some funding in the bill about worker retention grants, but I think that appropriations might do something different with that. There's an increase for scholarships for childcare providers. And then there's some transitional language, et cetera. And then finally, there's a paid family leave or a partial paid family leave program for parental benefits. And I would defer to Senator Kitchell on the details of that, but this is part of the bill that is up to 12 weeks of payment. I think it's based on $600 a week, and it is up to 600%, I believe, of poverty. So that basically anybody who's eligible for CCBAP could be eligible for this in order to stay home with their either new infant or newly adopted child for 12 weeks, one parent staying home with them. So that's included as a really part of the child care. So parents are actually paid to take care of their children for the first 12 weeks. 12 months would be less, but it's 12 weeks. So in terms of how much this costs, that is still to be determined. This bill still has a long path to go through both finance and appropriations. So the numbers right now, I would be reluctant to share until they're more solid. So we can certainly talk more about that as we have more information. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Questions, because I know I have heard a couple questions from the caucus. Okay, I'll begin with, does this hold us, we had said publicly, we were hoping that no family would pay more than 10% of their income on childcare. Does that accomplish this?
At this point, the answer is no.
Okay, not yet.
No.
Not yet. I mean, it is based on that goal, and some families, depending on where they are in the scale, would pay. I think it's around 15%.
14 to 18, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not quite the 10%. And I will remind people the 10% was fairly arbitrary, to be frank. There are differences in sort of opinion about where the right percentage is. It gets us closer to where we are now, but it's not full for everything.
And Senator
We don't know the answer to that, but there's none about the financing is in the bill. When you're looking, nothing about financing.
No, there is.
There's not, you mean a revenue source?
Yeah.
No, there's no revenue source in the bill yet. That's for our finance committee.
This afternoon.
This afternoon, they will be doing that. Oh, do you want me to? This afternoon.
Okay, Senator Harrison.
Just a quick question, is the 38.5% increase to the providers, is that presumed to be the increase in pay to the staff?
So yes, and that 30.5% is based on market rate studies. It brings us up. Right now rates are based on a market rate study, and it's like 75% of the market rate, and it's done every 3 years. So this brings the payments up to 100% of the market rate study, and across all providers. So that's why there's such a big jump. Then moving forward, it would be potentially based on a different methodology, the total cost of care. There's a report for that. But yes, the assumption is with this big increase in rates that providers would be able to immediately implement at least some professional compensation increases to providers.
Senator Lyons.
So I think that Senator Hardy's given a really good explanation of that. The one thing that we took into consideration with JFO and looking at all of the for finances and appropriations, how much it's going to cost, could we do the cost of care based on the RAND report? Well, currently, when you look at what we're paying per child, it's about $17,000, more or less. The RAND report suggested $28,000. So there's a discrepancy between what the administration is suggesting and what RAND report had. So working with JFO, we decided that we wanted to go ahead. We didn't want to wait until next year and sort out what would it be. So the figure that is being used at this point is around $20,000, $20,000 to $24,000. So that's where the money is coming from. And then the fine tuning of that, as Senator Harding indicated, will be in finance and appropriation. So the money piece is a work in progress, but
Right.
the policies in this bill are significant for our childcare providers and workers and businesses.
So I'm delighted to hear, and we're gonna move to housing, I'm delighted to hear the money is still a work in progress, because I heard over the weekend from several constituents concerns about both parents not being covered under parental leave and the wage replacement issue. So I assume that that is all discussion for finance.
Only if it gets financed, but my understanding is one parent at a time, but no, it would cost a lot more to pay two parents.
Senator Bray and Senator Campton, and then we're gonna move to housing.
Question, so we work on childcare every year, and I'm just wondering, is this sort of a major change that you think is going to be durable for a while, or is this improvements, but you're anticipating things coming next year or the year after?
I would say both. This is a major piece of legislation that moves the needle a significant amount in terms of support for childcare providers and childcare workers and families. So it's a major piece of legislation. It would make our program one of the best in the country in terms of support for childcare. And there's still more stuff coming, as I mentioned to you, several reports that are going to come back where we refine the details of the wage scale, refine the details of how we calculate provider reimbursements, report back on pre-K and how we fund and serve pre-K students. So I think there's more to come, but it is a significant step forward. I think it's pretty landmark legislation for childcare.
Great.
Once,
Senator Campion and then Senator Bruce, and then we're gonna move to housing because we.
Sure,
our time
Senator
is
Murphy
up.
already did this. I was late. So I just want to give a shout out to Senator Kulik, who's not here, who's very instrumental in that pre-K section. Very helpful, but I'm sure you already covered that.
I did not do
Oh,
that,
okay.
so thank you.
Good,
Yes,
good.
Senator Kulik, who's on both committees, really was the liaison
I
on
was
that.
hoping she'd be with us, but I don't see her.
Oh, she's not sick. Yes, she's not.
Nope,
She's away. It's okay.
nope, she's away. Senator Bruce.
So quickly, back to Senator Bray's question and the answer we got. This is landmark legislation. It is going to transform the child care sector. It is also not going to be cheap. And the money committees are at work on big numbers. I heard very clearly from the caucus going back to the off session that we wanted to move the needle in a dramatic way on childcare. That's what we're engaged in. And I really thank the committees. They've done incredible work producing the policies that will undergird all of this. Obviously, some big questions remain. Allison mentioned how much we're replacing in terms of wage. Questions like that are fine grained, but that will have big implication in terms of the price tag. So what I would hope everybody would do was familiarize themselves with the policies and the intent. And then as the numbers come out, we'll be in contact. We'll be having discussions as a caucus and one-on-one with everyone about how much this costs and how we plan to pay for it. And everyone will have a chance to air their views. So
Yeah.
with that said, we're going full speed ahead to get this out of the instant.
Great. Yes, our deadlines are serious.
And I will create a summary for the caucus once more the details are hammered out in the money committees, just
Which is really
so
helpful.
that you all have it to understand the bill better and also share with constituents.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Now, the same will be said for housing because we have two committees coming together, just like, well, actually, three committees on childcare, four, including the education. So I would like to bring up Senator Ron Hinsdale and Senator Gray to talk about where we are landing in a unified way on our housing, on our another huge bill and one of our top priorities, housing.
Great. Is this spot okay?
Yeah, I'd come a little
Yeah.
closer because the microphone is here. I know, it's not terrible. And when Martine joins us, she'll be able to hear you better here. And all the people that actually, which is 40 to 60 a week.
That's not different.
Okay,
And then your face is seen by there.
okay. So first, I just want to say, because for the Democratic Caucus, I had dinner last night with Governor Madeline Caucus, and she sends her best to everybody. And, you know, when you talk about childcare and worker protections, which hopefully we'll get to, and balancing housing and conservation, deep continuation of her legacy and the legacy of so many great Vermont leaders. She's really heartened by what we're doing, and that was a really nice way to start this week for me, and I want to extend that warmth and appreciation to all of you. The bottom line is Senator Bray and I have been really hard at work to find that balance in a really critical bill during a pivotal time for meeting the needs of Vermonters, to balance the pressing issues that we have in terms of our housing stock with the protections and smart growth patterns that we've come to know as critical to the way we think of the Vermont landscape. You know, we're working to make sure both of our committees present our best work that leaves no question unanswered and helps balance some really complex topics around Act 250 and municipal planning and zoning. And there are other really important pieces of the bill, you know, so it's not just those pieces, but that's what you're hearing about right now. And overall, you know, what this bill does is promote multifamily housing and invest in workforce and supportive housing. So people are going to start to say, are we doing all of this? And then these homes are going to go to second homeowners. You know, are we finding the right balance? You know, I'm really confident that we're doing what many in the country are doing to undo harmful practices that have discriminated against multifamily housing. That is the way that most people afford their first home or get into, you know, a safe, livable, walkable community for the first time. But we're still doing it in the Vermont way, which looks a little different than the rest of the country. So I can go into details. I think our committee this week is going to still take a look at the good work of the Natural Resources Committee to make sure we understand their intent. And for example, if there's a sunset of 3 years on the Act 250 provisions, we want to make sure that doesn't dampen all development in the next 3 years, because they don't know what that sunset means for them, when they will hit it, if they're already in the municipal process. So that's a big piece of what we're working on. You know, but in general, we feel like we've struck a solid balance, and we want to be ready to go to the floor with what Vermonters expect, which is a balance of housing and conservation, taking care of our neighbors, but also making sure we're doing it in a way that leaves our open spaces intact.
So the work we did in Cent Natural, I mean, I think I'll just say in an appreciative way, Act 250 for 53 years has stood Vermont in good shape in terms of smart planning and development, smart growth, keeping green spaces green, trying to have a high quality, keep a high quality environment and help us move forward. At the same time, we also realize there's a housing crisis, and we're looking for ways to both maintain natural spaces as well as develop the housing we need. So the committee went basically the construct we said, I think in our very first meeting together here, good planning is good planning. It can happen at any level, state level or municipal. So we look at where the most developed planning is, and we have it in designated areas, and they include designated downtowns, of which there are 6. They include growth centers, of which there are growth centers, of which there are 6. Designated downtowns are 24. And neighborhood development areas, of which there are 12. So these are all areas that have already stood up, made infrastructure and planning investments. So we're more confident that they're ready to receive more development. And so for those areas, we remove, for the kind of housing that we're really interested in, priority housing projects include 20% affordable housing. There are no caps anymore. You will not trigger Act 250 if you develop that housing in those areas where we've already seen planning. We also heard that leaves out many smaller towns all over the state. there are 200 plus, I think the number might be 229 village centers that designate. And so we added village centers as long as they use a very basic level of planning. They have to have zoning, they have to have some infrastructure, and they have to have an office and a regular zoning process so that they can anticipate, respond, proposed projects. And for those village centers, the priority housing cap goes all the way to 50. So having launched 2 projects in Bristol, Village of 1800, one of them's 15 units, another's 20. So the cap of 50 we thought was ample in terms of providing opportunity. So if you add it up, we have growth centers, you have neighborhood development areas, you have designated downtowns, and you have enhanced village centers all over the state. We're trying to encourage and support good planning and then doing housing, particularly affordable housing in those areas. Because we also, in the last 2 years, economic development, as well as our committee, have been working with Agency of Commerce and Community Development, the Natural Resources Board, to say, how can we do better on a, not just on an ad hoc responding to a crisis basis, but for the long haul, we've requested reports back. We said, rather than write permanent law without having received those reports, which I think would be poor governance, frankly, disrespectful of people doing that work, that we're just gonna write permanent law anyway. We put the 3-year sunset in. So that's a large window for people to get going on private housing and other housing. And then we'll have those reports back well before the sunset would ever arrive, and we can look at additional adjustments. But meanwhile, we're going to be responsive to the needs of today, and then we'll have opportunities to do planning for the long term. And that's how Natural Resources worked on it. And we have an amendment. We did a further refinement of it today. It will be brought, because we don't have the bill, the 5 centers and committee will offer that tuning amendment, but it doesn't change anything I said. That's it.
So, questions? Senator Burt.
Not a question, just a comment. I think this is a model of how committees should operate when they have overlapping jurisdiction and a history of some antagonism over certain issues. Both chairs have been bending over backwards to make sure that they're hearing their constituents, hearing the advocates, hearing the affected parties, but working with the other committee to ensure a good outcome. So many, many thanks to both.
Yeah, here. It is not always been us.
Not to put a damper on that.
Oh, Senator Sears.
How does the changes by Natural Resources impact the Not My Backyard crowd, which really has a great deal to do with the fact that we don't have affordable housing?
So
it seems like what I've read, and I haven't seen your amendments, seems like what I'm reading is you fall into that trap of allowing Not My Backyard.
So when you're exempted, as in all these areas we just went through from Act 250, then one of the areas of concern, it is rare, but when it happens, it is particularly upsetting to people involved. When appeals happen on Act 250 permits, and then things everybody comes home. So the exemptions mean you're not in Act 250, so you're not subject to those appeals. There is other appeals law that we address in the bill. For long-standing law that any 10 persons in a municipality can appeal decisions related to zoning and municipal development. We narrowed that down and said that they had to have a particularized, they need to allege a particularized interest, a common injury to the group, all the members of the group of 10, and it has to be directly naming a provision in law that is quote unquote that's being violated, being injured on. So we tightened down who can appeal even at the municipal discussions. But if you're in Act 250, out of Act 250, obviously Act 250 appeals for some folks are not going to be happening.
I mean, yeah, what I would say is that first you saw I think VLCT has been a really incredible partner on all of this, and they're not, happy with us right now, but, they went out on a limb and said, you're asking municipalities to do a lot. You're asking them to start to tamp down on the not in my backyard attitude, because the bill still has duplexing by right and quadruplexing by right if you're on municipal water and sewer. And natural resources actually took back up the density allowance along municipal water and sewer to say you can't stop 5 units per acre from being developed along municipal water and sewer, which we've all invested state and federal money in, that really critical infrastructure. So, Vermont League of Cities and Towns rightfully said, you're really asking us to go out on a limb with what tools our municipality has and our neighbors have within the municipality to plan our own growth. And we're asking you to look at Act 252 and do your part as the state. And so, we extended that further than Natural Resources was ready to go in the Housing Committee. But I wouldn't say it walked into a buzzsaw in Natural Resources, it got a haircut. It still left a lot of those pieces intact while we go back and signal, we're gonna look at this every year, we're gonna really truly share this jurisdiction and make sure that you don't face years of appeals municipally and then years of appeals in Act 250. And that includes even enhanced designation for these designated areas, the downtowns and other growth centers, so that they can essentially work to absorb the Act 250 criteria and administer themselves as part of their municipal process, and then not face a whole second process for that project in Act 250. So we're starting to signal that we're ready to acknowledge that the tools have really erred on the side of stopping good projects where we want them. We're starting to shift back, but you're going to get a lot of emails in all capital letters from folks who don't want anything to happen, who don't believe there's a housing crisis, who don't want to see this bill pass. And it means a lot that the Natural Resources Committee has gotten the bill out where they have, to say your environmental committee looked at this and we still believe that we're doing housing where it should be and smart growth, to really quell that concern that when people weaponize the environment against equity and the economy, I think we're stopping those weapons from existing more than they have for a long time.
The haircut might be that we didn't say, you can do priority housing everywhere without review. What we did stick to designated areas, enhanced village centers, et cetera. So I'd say there was a haircut maybe in terms of like saying it's the Wild West, you can do whatever you want, wherever you want. We said, no, we all agree that good planning is important. And so for these designated areas that we went through, I'd say there may have been a haircut outside them in some people's minds, but we applied hair growth tonic to those zones. And
I need a haircut. I really do.
Okay, I've got 2 questions and we have 5 minutes left. So Senator Chittenden and then Senator McCormick.
Designated areas, you're just referring to the neighborhood development areas, the village centers. Does anybody done an estimation of how much of total Vermont's land mass acreage that represents?
Well, under 5%, I believe.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the designated areas are 41 square miles of 9,600 square miles, if you want to do the math. So it's a small concentrated area. We do, again, allow duplexing and quadruplexing inside of those areas by right for duplexing and along municipal water and sewer, which does add to the mass we're talking about. But we are talking about less than 1% of the state for that accelerated development. And we're talking about a path where we look at a lot more changes for how Act 250 works, not so people don't have to engage in Act 250, but they don't have to go into a phase of uncertainty for years in the process.
I don't remember on the village centers, of which there are 229, I wasn't sure if they were included in that 41 square miles or not.
Yes.
They are.
Nice. It's all the designated areas are included in that. And we also remember in other pieces of legislation have spent money and invested in bylaw modernization, encouraging towns to begin to enhance their designated areas too, if that's an opportunity that they have in that process. Senator McCormick and then Senator Starr.
I want to thank both committees for an item, it's a bill that it's not mentioned. It's a big bill, so it's the the proposal of a umbrella permit, analogous to what we do with industrial parks and unit developments, because that would provide Act 250 review, environmental protection. We would not lose any of that, but it would expedite it and speed it up. And I would suggest that the Act 250 exemption argument, if you think about it, makes no mention of the benefits of Act 250 review. It's as though they're not there. And also it carries with it a claim that Act 250 review is to blame for there being a housing crisis. And I have asked the supporters of exemptions repeatedly, please, what are the statistics of this? How do we explain a housing crisis around the entire nation, most of which doesn't have Act 250? I voted for the bill because I want to stay at the table and because a bill is a work in progress. This will be continuing, and because we do have a housing crisis. And I think it's important that the housing bill, but I do hope that people will continue to be skeptical of the anti-Act 250 argument. And it is anti, it ignores the benefits and it assumes that it's a problem. And I have not seen a lot of effort to prove that it's actually a problem. So I hope it has.
We all need to own, we have been underbuilding housing since the 80s. So, I mean,
And no one denies that. And that's not a bone of contention.
Senator Scott.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about the town centers and village centers. I guess my question, representing basically all small towns in my district, how is this going to affect small towns, say for 12 or 1,500 people and less, on building in their particular communities?
So of the 229, I think it is, village centers defined around the state, as long as they have those fundamental provisions we talked about, that you have zoning, you have some municipal infrastructure related to water, sewer, it can be traditional or it can be an alternate system approved by A&R. As long as you have a planning office and some ability to administer, then you're eligible for the accelerated development of priority housing projects in those towns. So, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to village centers. Some will already be there. Some will need to invest some time and energy to bring themselves up to that level. We have planning grants. I think many have already taken advantage of that. So we're trying to build on those who are already leading the way. And honestly, I hope that people see it as an invitation to do good development that works well for their village. I live in a village of 1,800, and I see how much work it takes to bring in well-sided, well-planned project.
I just want to add to that, the threshold in all other areas is still 10 units within a 5-mile radius in 5 years. So there's still the opportunity to build without hitting that Act 250 threshold. And those projects should see more resources. That's of course a question for the appropriations committee as well, but we try to continue targeting our investments toward workforce housing, missing middle home ownership, and a lot of, well-planned or needed projects that our different housing partners and the affordable housing community are going to build. And that's across the state. So we've invested $500 million in housing projects. If, wherever you're not seeing those built, we should continue to listen to your folks, and we have been. And we might see some changes outside of the designated areas next year and beyond. But, they can still do small, meaningful projects in our smaller communities that have state resources behind them to make sure that they're working well for seniors and for other folks. We also invest in mobile home communities, which I'm not saying invest in your district, but we have $16 million going into mobile home communities around the state, which are mostly in our rural areas, almost 10% of the population living there. And we're hoping to get base funding to continue to support the good infrastructure of our mobile home communities communities because that's a great option for many Vermonters in rural areas to have affordable housing.
We're at time. If we have other questions, please.
Allison, there.
Oh, sorry.
Well, there's
Senator
two
Harris.
quick things that we don't talk about as much in the housing bill because they weren't controversial. Any place that has single family zoning or allows single family homes, you can build a duplex. That's in the bill, and so that would be.
And anywhere in the town.
Right,
Not
right,
just.
anywhere in the town. So that's something that's available. And then there's also a section that says that towns can't reduce their requirements in the planning process, which that has been happening. So if there are instances where towns are actually requiring more than they're permitted to, they can't do that anymore. So those two avenues are available everywhere.
Thank you. And there's lots more. We'll have additional summaries and work on this. We're at time. Thank you all very much. And finance is meeting at 1. Ops at 1:30. Approach at 1:30.